One oversight. I should have spoken to that person. There are some visitors here in the service this morning, and I hope somebody spoke to them because I didn't. One contemptuous word towards someone, or one moment's delay caused by a slight doubt. I don't know if I should do it or not, and we just hang on for a second. Now, that's all it takes to break the law. No wonder the Pharisees were such uptight people. Wouldn't you hate to have lived around those folks? Oh, no, don't sit on that chair. Oh, no, don't drink from that side of the cup. Turn it around the other way. There are people in my life like that. There are people in your life. We sort of call them perfectionists, but they are like the Pharisees in the spirit in terms of trying to turn the law on in every angle and make sure that it was being kept. Verse 2 says, if it could, would they not have stopped being offered? Talking about the sacrifices. For the worshipers would have been cleansed once for all and would no longer have felt guilty for their sins. There are religions where if you commit a sin, the way you dissolve that sin, get rid of it, is by obeying some instructions. Unfortunately, that doesn't deal with the guilt. And if you try to live your life by obeying the law and doing everything that the Old Testament says, then what you realize is that there is no stopping point. Because in every situation, you've got to open the book and you've got to find what does the law say on this one. I mean, this is the Sabbath. Should I do this? If you follow my sermon manuscript, you know that I never say exactly what is written on that manuscript. If you attend the next service and listen to me preach the same sermon again, you will realize that it is not going to be the same sermon. Because the message of God morphs to the needs of the listener. The laws of God are very rigid. They never change. They sometimes leave us in a predicament. And if we have lived, obeyed all of the laws but one, the predicament would be that we are lost. Now, I've known people whose lives are regimented around the laws of God. And most of these people are proud. Now, some of them are, are really, they're messed up. Because they're constantly afraid because they have broken the laws. And they deal with this unnecessary burden of guilt, and they're always confessing. And they have a poor self-image. But then there are other people who build their lives around the law and are so very proud that they have kept the law. And they're easily provoked if you do something that is contrary to the law. And you might have someone like that, saying, the Old Testament says you can't do that. And the thing is, they expect absolute conformity. Not to the law, but to what they think the law means. And that creates some problems. There's always an interpreter to tell you what the Old Testament means, not what God wants. Believers with the Jewish background thought that everybody should be living according to the law. Those with a pagan background thought that it was unnecessary to do some of those things. They made absolutely no sense. And we fit in, for the most part, with that second group. And we realize that if you make your life about obedience, if you say that my eternity is based on how well I can keep God's law, then there's no room for grace. there's no room for mercy. So you have the law and grace and mercy. And rather than the law being at the top and grace and mercy being at the bottom of the triangle, we need to flip it around so that grace and mercy, the base, are at the top with the law at the bottom. Verse 5, therefore, when Christ came into the world, he said, sacrifice and offering you did not desire, but a body you prepared for me. With burnt offerings and sin offerings you were not pleased. Then I said, here am I. It is written about me in the scroll, I have come to do your will, O God. Sounds strange, but God really doesn't want our obedience. You can have robots who are programmed to do exactly what you say. You can teach your dog to obey you. And you can give him the very simple commands of lie, sit, heel. God doesn't want that. God wants you. Jesus came as a living sacrifice to show us that was the example of how God wanted us to live. Not by necessarily making a single sacrifice and repeating that act over and over and over. What Jesus said is that God desires that we live for Him constantly. But most of us would like to do something that we can check off the list. And we feel like we're a little bit better and we're a little bit safer if we have a lot of checks on our paper. But what God says is there are no checks. You are saved and live for me for the rest of your life. You live as if in a shadow box. You can always look at yourself and see what you used to be and what you are right now. You are in a shadow box. You can see what you are right now and where you need to be tomorrow. So it's about following God and doing what God wants us to do. Good example came up this week. One of the loves of my life, helping the homeless. Last Tuesday, I got a call that there were some homeless people on our property. And they had been drinking a little bit, more than a little bit, but they had been drinking some, scuffling around and littered the place, approached some people, and those people were afraid. Now, I'm sitting there working on my manuscript and typing in at this very point in the sermon. I've just gone to the up by Lee Highway and approached the guy who's there panhandling and said, you know, you're going to have to get your tent or your bedroll and camp elsewhere. And he finally agreed to do it. And I came back to the office and returned working on my sermon. And I felt absolutely horrible. Because you see, earlier in the day, the Homeless Coalition had called and said, can we count on Ridgedale again this year to be one of our sponsors? And I said, sure. That's the Grateful Gobbler Walk. And, you know, I do it every year. My family does it every year. We're going to be there, and I will encourage other church members to be there, and it's in our church budget. We will support you. But then I was having to deal with what I had just done. And about that time, Bill Lowry came in because Bill had gone up with me to the summit, and he said, preacher, I want to show you what I got. And he held out this knife, and, you know, he was wearing a rubber glove, and I thought, you know, told Bill, I said, I am so glad that you came at this very moment. I said, because I was beating myself up over asking the homeless people to leave, even though we filled up pickup truck with beer bottles and beer cans and garbage. And then it dawned on me, with the danger involved of the knife, there's going to come a time in our life when God's going to say, I love you with all of my heart. You are absolutely at the top of my list. I would walk a mile for you and do it over and over and over again. But you have to either move in or move on. You can't be a spiritual homeless person.